Actually,
You
I
know,
went to IKEA the other day, and they have like doormats that say Huga on them now,
Huga.
which
Huga. It's
I thought was
pronounced Huga. Okay.
Huga.
And what's the etymology? Is it Swedish or uh,
It said it was a
Norwegian or something?
Danish, yeah,
Danish.
Danish word.
Uh,
Um,
I
I
would have looked it up. I wouldn't have asked you. I would have looked it up myself if I knew how to spell it, but I didn't know where to begin.
yeah, it was. I had to look up how to pronounce it. I'd only ever seen it, so
Uh,
yeah, it's a that was a fun word. That was a fun episode.
and how about your own name? Tony fell off the table.
Uh,
Um, uh, Carrie Mikelani. It sounds Hawaiian. Are you
uh,
from that from the islands?
I'm not. My mom is.
Your mom.
So
Okay.
Miki's Japanese, and then Lonnie's Hawaiian. So my mom is ethnically Japanese, but from
Okay.
Hawaii. Yeah,
Sure. Sure. Which island did she grow up on?
Maui.
Maui.
Oh, yeah, all my family still lives in well, Maui and Oahu, but they're all
I
still
lived
there.
there for 4 years. I was
Oh,
in the
really?
army and I was stationed on
Okay.
Oahu. But of course, lots of other times we were dispatched elsewhere.
Mm. hmm I haven't been
Uh,
back in a long time. I spent a lot of time there as a kid, but um, yeah, it's been years since I've been back.
oh, I'm sure they're dying for you to get back there once this is all over.
Right? Yeah. So I thought there would be more of the press behind me and less of the giant cat tree, but I guess that's we got there.
But it looks great. Let me put my glasses on. No, it's your work studio. It looks
Yeah,
wonderful. Yeah.
I can tell how much
So,
the cats dominate this space,
how
but
many do you have?
just two. They're siblings, so they're very bonded.
Yeah. That little contraption looks like it was fun to put together.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. And then they destroyed it within like I don't know, a week and a half, I think.
Now that spring has come, my cat is mostly an outdoor cat. So he leaves
Oh,
around 10 o'clock at night and comes in around 5 or 6 in the morning. But now that spring has come and there's little mices and shrews and moles and
hmm
birds, he's beginning to bring me presents in the morning.
oh gosh.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're still alive when they come in. So he brought
Oh
one in the other
no.
night at around 12:30, and I was up till about 2:30 chasing that mouse around before I finally caught him.
Oh no. That's
I
no.
was
Think
really,
my girls are totally indoor cats. I don't think I could handle that, but
yeah,
every
you
once in a
couldn't.
while, I think a bug or something gets in because they run over and eat something before I can like pull it out of their mouth, and that's always scary.
Yeah, Tony's a tomcat. He's very ill mannered
Mm.
with his prey. Um, Gosh, we may be live.
Oh,
Let me take a quick look here. Well, I'm going to take a chance that we're live. It's 9:30, and the clock has gone away. So let's get going. Good
sounds
morning,
good.
everybody. Ed Markowitz here. Welcome to the Rare Book Cafe, the book lovers' rendezvous, where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free. We're the only live streamed program on the internet devoted entirely to rare and collectible books and the people who love them, and that's you. This morning, I have with me Carrie Mike, apologize, Mike Lonnie Schroeder. She is part of a new breed of book artists in America, and we're looking forward to spending some time together. Good morning, Carrie.
Good morning.
Where are you physically located today?
I'm in San Antonio, Texas.
But
I've been here
you,
for about 3 years, but
okay. But you are the artist in residence at the Jaffe Center at Florida Atlantic University. I guess
hmm
everybody is working a little remotely these days.
hmm yeah, unfortunately, I was only there. I only visited once for a few weeks, but and then I was supposed to go back last year, and we kept postponing it until finally it was obvious it was just going to be too much hassle to go back. So it is going to be completed remotely.
Okay.
So that's something I'm working on now.
Well, I'm going to come back to you in a moment and ask you to tell us what an artist in residence does.
Okay.
But first, I'd like to remind everybody that we're here every Saturday at 12:30 Eastern Time, 9:30 Pacific, and 5:30 Greenwich Mean Time. And I think it's 7:30 in Alexandria, Egypt, where our good friend and book conservator Sharif Afifi has been spending some time in Russia in recent weeks, leading sessions on restoring ancient books. We look forward to hearing from him in a future edition of the Rare Book Cafe and what the book ecosystem looks like in Russia these days. We are live streaming on Facebook, and now we're also live on YouTube as well. Our wonderful executive producer at the end of the day, Alan Smith, will take this video podcast and turn it into an audio podcast, which you can find as Rare Book Cafe Raw. And you can find it where most great podcasts are found, places like Spotify and Google Podcasts. So you can watch Rare Book live with us every Saturday morning, or pick us out later in the week, or plug us into your car. So let's get back to Carrie Mike Lonnie Schroeder, who's currently with us from San Antonio, Texas. Carrie, what is an artist in residence?
For this project, it's the Helen M. Salzburg. So it's a funded residency in or at the Jaffe Center at FAU, and so it includes it's for an academic year, and I have to do a creative project and teach a workshop. That was all supposed to happen there, but so they have an open call. I'm sorry.
But your artist in residency is a 3-year program, isn't it? Didn't you start in 2019?
No. It was supposed to have ended in 2020, and then they extended it because of 2020. So it's going to be finishing up this summer.
Okay.
So I'm still kind of working on it, like, because things just have changed a lot with what I have access to, and my project that I'm working on is so Florida specific that I've had to kind of finagle some things.
Is this the book that you're writing about an extinct Floridian bird?
Yes, it's about the dusky seaside sparrow, which was a bird that lived on Merritt Island, and it went extinct in it started in the 90s. It finally went extinct. There was only 5 left by like the late 80s, but it was because of Cape Canaveral, basically. So it's just this really complicated history. And then the last remaining few of them, they were actually on display at Disney World. And so and there was only males left, so they couldn't breed them. So I'm studying there. I went to University of Florida for the first part of the project to talk to the ornithologist there, because they have a large amount of specimens. They actually have the last one who died, they call him Orange Band, because he had a little orange anklet to tag him. So that's where I started the whole project, working with an ornithologist there, and that was pretty intense. And then the printing and the actual art making portion of it was happening at Jaffe Center.
Carrie, you've got quite a CV, and you have worked with some really high visibility people in the book art world, like Julie Chen in Oakland and Craig Jensen at Book Lab 2. What do you take away from the masters? I'm sure you absorb as much as you can, but are there any specific life lessons, let alone book art lessons, that you take away from these master book artists?
Yeah, working with both of them is pretty life changing. I worked with Julie. As I got my MFA at Mills College, so I studied with her and then I started working for her at her studio. I worked there for about 4 years, and then when I moved to Texas, it's Craig Jensen at Book Lab too, and it's interesting because they work so differently, and it was nice. I don't know, to learn these two different. They're both book artists, but in very different ways. You know, Craig does these limited edition, fairly traditional books with other, and he collaborates a lot more with other artists. Where Julie doesn't collaborate a lot. Her work is specifically hers, and it's much more less traditional, I guess. Very sculptural and these kind of innovative, crazy structures. But they both kind of, I think, push the limits of what books can be in very different ways. And I think the one thing that they both definitely have in common is they're both perfectionists, and that's just kind of how it is and how it needs to be. So I learned a lot, I think, through that too, just the standards of what we were doing there.
Carrie, I was checking out some of your pieces on your own website, carrieschroeder.com.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I love the 3D. Well, I guess all books are 3D, but I love the mechanical pieces. You had two pieces on your website. One was called The Reliquary,
Mm-hmm.
and the other was called Consomme. And they're just so mechanical. There's you open and you fold them, and they reveal more as you open more. What concept are you going for in that uniqueness?
I think there's something about. I mean, I guess it's an obvious statement to say that books need to be touched or handled for them to function, and I like to explore that a little more with the work.
It's an obvious statement to say that books need to be touched or.
So the I think the movement and the unraveling or these actions that you're taking with your hand also help to tell the story. And so I actually do have the book right here. If I can switch and
yeah, please, let's see it.
Show that. Okay, let me move this.
Which one is it, Consomme or Reliquary?
Consume. I have Consume, and I have I do have Reliquary. I can start with Reliquary. I also have Influx Structure, which is also a
Oh, that was a good one. That was a good one too. I'm sorry, I didn't mention that one. Yeah. Please take over. Share some of your work with us.
Well, let me see if I can figure out this camera thing. Now the camera's different. Oh, here we go.
I'm sorry,
okay,
I mispronounced that. You can. Yeah, I'm sorry I mispronounced your work. I called it Consomme. You can tell I have food on my mind.
No, it's totally fine. Let's see if this works. Okay.
There you go.
There we go. Okay. Let me move this. Oh, there's my headphone cord. So this is Reliquary. And sorry, forgive the cord here. So it's a rolling box structure, I guess, if that's a thing. This foil stamping, and it's a series of shadow boxes. And so I'm originally from Las Vegas, and if you've been to Vegas, it's this kind of crazy over the top city. But if you drive outside of the city in any direction, it's just nothing but desert. And in the desert, there's just a lot of trash. And so it's just this constant reminder of that people used to be there, or structures used to stand, and there's something just about the vastness of this space that I was always really drawn to, and the ideas that these objects just told stories by themselves. They were able to stand alone as objects and still hold this kind of memory. So these are all objects I found at just a side of the road dump site in the desert. So if a bottle cap, sorry, I should back up real quick. So each object has a corresponding gold stamped sigil, and then these are letterpress printed text panels. And so with these books, I mean, there's text to be read and there's illustrations and objects to be seen, but there's also just something really satisfying about the movement of the structure itself, like this kind of I don't know, I call it unraveling, but this unrolling.
Well, it's almost like a book, right? When you're reading a book, you can't wait to turn the next page. And here you're rewarded not just with the words on the next page, but you're rewarded with the visuals and the experience of turning the page.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so the last panel here is this, it's like a fogged plexi cover, but this is the area where these things were found. So yeah, this is one way I play with structure in the work. And then I was going to show influx structure real quick. So this one was done in 2018, dirty. But I think when I'm making a book, part of the process is I get really obsessed with an idea and I need to know everything I can about it, and I don't really know why yet. And sometimes they come together, and sometimes otherwise I just have a long list of stuff that someday I'll do something with. So this book in particular, this is all iron filings in the case. I don't know if you can see that, but it's gathered around a magnet that's underneath. And I like this idea of there's a form, like a solid form, but when you open it, it's released from the magnet, which is under here. So it's just loose dust that's inside here. So by opening the book, you're destroying this structure.
How clever.
This formation. And these are some of the notes of just little facts that just sound very poetic. Again, there's just something to it that I felt like they were connected somehow, but I wasn't sure until I put the book together. So like, for example, again, I'm from Nevada, so a lot of my work, I think a lot about the Nevada test site. My dad worked for the test site, and there was 100 above ground nuclear bomb tests in Nevada test site, and almost 1,000 underground tests that they don't talk about as much. But so tourists would go there to watch the mushroom clouds, and from the northern part of Las Vegas.
That's crazy.
And so, yeah, and there's actually a bar there that we used to hang out at, but it was called Atomic Liquor, and they had photos there. It's been there forever, but they have photos up on their wall of just people hanging out on the balcony watching these mushroom clouds from afar. It's pretty scary looking at it from now, but yeah. So like one of the facts here is just about just one series of tests during a 10-year period was Operation Plum Bob. 29 tests has released 10 times more nuclear fallout into the atmosphere than Chernobyl. And then there was something about that because there's these giant craters in the earth. And then I talk about the Nazca lines, how they're not really sure what the Nazca lines are for. Those are those big geoglyphs in Peru.
Sure.
But one of the theories is that they're there for meditation and the spiritual practice where you can't really see the shape from the ground, but you're supposed to walk the path. And then eventually you walk it so many times that your body just knows what the shape is. And again, that's just one of the theories of it, but I liked that one the best. So that's what I went with.
You mean it's not a landing strip for UFOs?
It could be that too. Ancient Aliens says it is. So these are pressure printed with a Van der Kook, and then pochoir, and then more letterpress printing for the text. This is the craters in Nevada. And I like this idea of it's almost like excavating, right? When you're reading it, just these little things that seem, oops, this is a little out of order. It should be like this.
Wow.
Okay, there we go. That's what it should have been. So got put back together wrong by me. But so I like this idea of digging to get to the information and kind of pulling back layer by layer. These are brain synapses. So it kind of alternates between these immense human systems and these minuscule human systems, and these are the Nazca lines. So this is what I mean by, these are enormous, but people could walk these paths and then just eventually over time meditate on the shape until they could feel that this is a condor or something
Yeah.
in their body. And there's just something with that, like leaving these kind of messages to who, that by these kind of scars left in the earth, like with the craters at the test site or the Nazca lines. And this is the nervous system, the highway system. I was reading a lot about the highway systems and just how many towns, like entire towns, were destroyed to expand the highway systems, which is, I guess it's one of those things of what's necessary and what isn't. And it was obviously necessary for transportation and expansion, but people don't talk about the expense as much. Unless they're talking about money, then people like to talk about money. And then we have the heart here. And so these have little, I'm sorry?
Excuse me a quick second. We've got a question from someone in our audience, or a comment from Mary Kay Watson. She says, I spent a winter in Boulder City, and it's true, there's metal rusting garbage that you can find around the desert, and because there's not much rain, it doesn't rust quickly. You mentioned that you incorporate some natural detritus in some of your artwork. Is that a statement that you're trying to make, or just something you're fascinated with the things that you find, or is it a intentionality with respect to recycling? What are your thoughts when you find these things on the side of the road?
I think it's a little bit of all of that. I think, sorry, let me switch my camera view. I think there's something about objects that it's very difficult, I think, to replicate. So I tend not to, I mean, I guess I could draw or paint them or photograph them, but it's not the same as having the object themselves. And if I can incorporate that, I want to. And I have a strange thing with touch, just holding things. And I get more information from that than a lot of times than from reading or hearing, right, or any other sense. So it works for me. I figured it must work for someone. I don't know.
It works for me when I find a book, especially one that's been inscribed or signed by somebody famous. You know that they held this book in their hands. You get the feeling of connection. But there's still so much mystery. You don't know where it was signed or under what circumstances, perhaps not the exact date. So there's so much mystery that's involved with these tangible objects that give you satisfaction while at the same time leave you wanting for more.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that that Boulder City was mentioned, because that's actually where these objects were from. Was just before Boulder City. I mean, I'm from Vegas, but there's an area of a stretch of desert between Vegas and Boulder City where they ends up kind of being a trash dump.
Oh, how coincidental!
Yeah.
Carrie, you have your own press, Coyote Bones Press. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's just the imprint I use, the name I use for my work. If I'm, I started it right after grad school, where originally I wanted to create my work and then other artists' work, but so far it's been primarily just my own work. It's hard to make those separations, and I'm still kind of learning how to do that, I think. Where there's not a clear separation with like how much of it is collaboration with others, or how much is just taking on commission bindings for other people's projects. So Coyote Bones is specifically my work.
When you do a publication, what are your run sizes normally?
Right now about 25.
About 25.
That's usually where I'm comfortable. Yeah.
Your material is in some really prestigious libraries: UC Berkeley, UCLA, Stanford, Savannah College of Art and Design. the Otis College of Art and Design. How do your pieces end up there? Or do they find you, or do they ask you for consigned pieces that they want to add for their collection?
Um, some of them I don't know how it ends up there, but some of them sometimes people contact me. Yeah. Um, Usually there's been a big push for collecting for work about the environment, and so that's been good. Where they're trying to build up artist book collections and things like that. I sell a lot through my booksellers too, where they find a library that they think my work will fit in well. So I can't really take a lot of credit for where they end up. They just,
But it must feel
I'm
good
grateful for
if they
it.
do,
But
that
yeah.
they'll be in a permanent exhibit somewhere, and future generations will be able to study and discuss your work.
Hmm. Yeah. No, it's. I'm grateful for it. I
Carrie, anybody who's watching the show today can see that there's a generational difference between the two of us.
mean,
And I think the thing that I find most exciting about your generation is that uh, you've always got a side hustle going on. You're so
mhm.
active. You're not defined in one. You don't let your art define you in a very narrow scope. And there's a word that's way underutilized, and that's Renaissance woman. You know, people talk about the Renaissance man, but
Mhm.
seriously, people of your generation find ways to bring in ancillary interests and incorporate them in your efforts.
Yeah, I think I mean, I also wonder if a lot of that is about necessity, though. I mean, not to get too doom and gloom, but like, I don't know a lot of people my age with retirement plans
Right.
or things like that.
Well, it's not really
It's
doom and gloom. I mean, it's real. It's a social observation. We had one recession back in the
mhm,
12, 8 time frame.
mhm,
Your generation lost a lot of equity, lost a lot of jobs, and then on top of it, the pandemic, another
mhm.
uh, bam bam shot. So yeah, I guess I can understand what you mean by necessity.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a lot of things going on as sort of my version of a safety net in some kind of way, but also it's just um, I do whatever I can to make work that I find meaningful.
Uh-huh.
So I'm willing to work hard to make sure that that happens.
Yeah, there's no reason to be a starving artist when you can just be an artist.
Right. Exactly.
And one of the things you do is you give workshops. Tell us about the workshops, and if any of our members of our audience would like to participate, how could they do that?
Yes, I do teach workshops. I teach at the Southwest School of Art in San Antonio. Those classes are, we've just gotten back to teaching in person, but the classes are very limited and they're like 4 to 6 week workshops usually. But I do teach online. I have a couple workshops coming up at the Austin Book Art Center and at Jaffe Center, and that might be it right now. But I've gotten weirdly into, it sounds so silly, I've gotten really into magic lately. And these ideas of magic tricks and these optical toys. So I am teaching this one workshop that I'm pretty excited about. Can switch my camera real quick again and show. But this one I'm teaching at the Austin Book Art Center. There's still a few spots left, and it is online, and they send out a kit in the mail and everything. And but I'll also be teaching this in the fall at the Jaffe Center too. So this is my magic box book with paper toys. And camera here a little bit. All right. So this is oops, is my camera glitching? Or is that working?
It did freeze up for a moment, but we can hear you okay. Here you go.
Okay. So this is a magic wallet book. So or box book. So we paper toys, and this is all kind of a set. So we have a thaumatrope, which are these little the bird on one side of the cage on the other.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
Right? They're so, I remember playing with them as a kid, and they're just so much fun. I have a little Vovell that's going to be a magic 8-ball where I can ask it little questions. And then the box. Also, here's the magic trick part. Opens this way. And this is a flexagon that changes into.
Oh my goodness. How'd you do that?
Yeah, they're great. They're just, I don't know, something I've been interested in. So yeah, I've been making these little kits. And that's one of the workshops. So that one's at Austin Center. I think it's just atxbookart.org is the class. And then I'm teaching some other, I guess, more traditional classes. Some ones on tunnel books and flag books and things like
that. That was fun. That was so innocent and childlike. And when you were doing your influx structure before, it reminded me. Remember in school we used to make these things out of paper. We called them fortune tellers, and you move your fingers and you pick a number and a color, and that's what some of your work reminds me of. It's fun.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I like it. I think I really love things like pop-up books, and I'm always surprised. I know there are some artists working with pop-up books and movables, but it is surprising to me that it's not more mainstream, that people aren't doing more serious content with things like pop-up books and movables. And it does have a childlike toy like something to it, but I wonder if that's just nostalgia. I don't know if there's a real reason why the content is always so childlike.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, we had Richard Minsky on the show, and
cool.
He was doing a clamshell that when you opened it, the book popped up out of the clamshell. Very, very clever, probably patentable. But that was the first time that I began to look at these enclosures as something more than book protectors.
Yeah.
Hey, Carrie, before we let you go, tell us a little bit about your podcast. I had the great opportunity to drive to Eugene, Oregon, a 2 hours, one direction drive yesterday, and I started to take on your podcast. You are quite articulate. They were very well produced.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's fun. I've been doing it. So sorry, my backup. After you said I'm articulate, now I'm stumbling. So I have a podcast called Books in the Wild, and it's just on booksinthewild.com, or it is also it's on Spotify and Stitcher and all that. But it's a book arts podcast, and I unfortunately update it infrequently, but I really love doing it. And I started it in late 2017. I think there's like 20 episodes, but I kind of just made a podcast that I would want to listen to. So I
want to listen to more of
it. It's just a podcast of weird facts and history and interviews with other book artists and just kind of anything in that whole vein. So there's stories about, the last episode was about all the new words added to the dictionary in 2020. But I have ones about, there was a book binding murder that took place in the late 1800s. These kind of spooky, weird tales that I don't know. I try to make it available to everyone, so it's not too technical that not.
Well, I learned something in your last podcast. It was your word of the year for 2020. Share that with us.
Huga.
Huga. I had never heard it before. I was going to look it up, but I didn't know how to spell it, so I didn't know where to go with it.
Yeah, it's not spelled like how it's Hygge, and it is a Danish word. It was added to the dictionary last year. And
what does it mean?
It's one of those words that it takes 15 English words to translate, but it's about comfort and snuggliness, and it's about relaxing, and there's there's whole articles written about it, where they describe it as, wearing sweatpants and drinking tea, sitting by the fireplace, and just the kind of simple comforts that luxurious, and but you don't need a lot of luxury to feel that way. And that's what hygge means.
Oh.
So I recommended hygge.
One of our listeners just made sure we know how to spell it. Hygge.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Hygge. Very good. Well, before we let you go, I have one more fact I want to ask you about, because I thought it was my favorite documentary of 2020, and that was the movie that you apparently starred in for about a minute and a half. Tell us about that experience.
The Bookmakers.
Documentary. The Bookmakers documentary. A great show.
Mm-hmm. It's streaming on PBS right now. I mean, I'm in it for like 30 seconds.
Yeah, but really. You're in it. No. 30 seconds or 30 minutes, you're in it.
That was when I was working for Julie Chen. So Julie's one of the artists featured in that documentary, and it's a fun documentary. It follows a lot of different book artists. I think they did a pretty good job at showing different. They show children's book illustrators, they show book artists, they show more fine press, bookmakers. There's Mark Sargianis from Prototype Press is kind of like the through line of the documentary, and he's doing that insane fine press edition of Ham on Rye by Charles Bukowski. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of shows everybody working on these things. It follows around the Codex Symposium and Book Fair, and I think it just shows how insane we all are, right? We just everybody seems so focused on oh, we got to get to this main event and working on these books, but it's fun. It was a good experience. They filmed it years ago. It was before the.
This has been fun too. It's been fun for me. It's always fun for me to be around young, smart people and talented people, because I have no smarts or talent. So I'm going to live vicariously through some of your work. I hope you come back again someday, Carrie.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thank you so much.
The audience is really excited about your work. The comments that are coming in are just clever, thoughtful, original, colorful. You've hit a home run here.
Thank you so much. It was so good talking with you.
All right, keep smiling.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, folks, on with the show. I'd like to remind all of you that the Rare Book Cafe is live every Saturday, but we do have segments in each show that are pre-recorded. For example, we've got a segment coming up very shortly with David Hess from the Bookman store in Orange, California, Things Found in Old Books. David's a regular on this show, and he's got join us today with some of the things he's recently found in old books. We're a little light on our usuals this week. Lee has gone to Disney World with her grandkids. Who could blame her? Everybody loves Disney World. Lynn is a little under the weather. He won't be with us. But we've got some great things coming up in the show, particularly about poetry. As many of you know, this month, April, is Poetry Month, and we're going to do a bit of a poetry testimonial later in the show. But right now, we're ready for Things Found in Old Books by David Hess. Bring it on, Alan.
Hello, this is David from the Bookman in Orange, California. Welcoming you to the weekly segment of Things Found in Old Books. And I have another 4 items for you this week to look at that I found in books that are kind of interesting. At least I find them interesting. The first book, it's by Anne Morrow Lindbergh, called The Steep Ascent, and it was published in 1944. But the thing about the item I found in this book is there's a story that goes with it. I was at the front counter. I have surrounded by books, stacks of books that I get from boxes that, we have millions of boxes full of books, and I'm pricing them and trying to get them out on the shelves ASAP. And customer came in and he was commenting on the Rare Book Cafe, which he really enjoyed, and the fact on the things found in used books that he found that interesting, that some of the stuff we find in books. And as I was pricing this book and talking to him, voila, as if by magic, I found something. And it was kind of an aha moment, and we both kind of laughed about it. But what I found was this little picture dated 1961 on the back of two swaddling infants laying on the bed. They most likely are twins. And it says 8/3/1961, 8 days, first day at home. So there we go. We got the first baby pictures of somebody from 1961. Chances are these people are still roaming the earth. And if you want your picture back, I have it. I'd be glad to give it back to you. So that was interesting find number one. Number two, in this book of O. Henry short stories, a big giant tome in the front, I found this card. And what it is, and it's a card sent out to people from the Pan American Airways. And it's an invitation to travel the world with the color and sound of Pan American Airways films. And you are cordially invited to a showing of films at the Gold Ballroom at the Sheraton Palace Hotel in San Francisco. Now, I can't imagine anything like this occurring today. The films are This is Lebanon, Wings to Hawaii, and Brazil. So in 1961, or 62, you could go to the ballroom and see films of travelogue films instead of, I guess, watching them on TV. Nice big color. But I found that kind of interesting. I never heard of such a thing. So that was from Pan American Airways, which I don't believe is still in operation anymore. It closed down. In the Great Enterprise from 1952, I found this little book catalog. And this book catalog is a April 54 book guide, a monthly reading guide to good reading, published by the San Jose Bookshop. It gives a little address, a little phone number from 1954. And inside the book are all the new up and coming April 54 things to read that they're going to be carrying in their store. And they have a little guide of nonfiction, how-to, reader's choice, bestsellers. And some of the authors they talk about that they're going to be having is the newest Rex Stout book, 3 Men Out, The Bad Seed by William March, Pocketful of Rye by Agatha Christie, and one I found, one of my favorites is The Long Goodbye by Raymond Chandler. I would like to go in there and buy that right now. Beautiful dust jacket. Casino Royale by Ian Fleming. And a bunch of stuff that personally I never heard of. I'm sure I've seen them come across. They just didn't leave a remembrance. And so it goes on with some nonfiction and inspirational stuff. Clown by Emmett Kelly. So it's quite an elaborate little book for the San Jose bookstore, but it sure does give you an insight into what people were reading back in 1954, 66 years ago. And right here is the bestsellers of the year, or of that time. So number one in fiction was Not as a Stranger by Morton Thompson. I think that's that medical book, the medical drama book. Nonfiction, the number one is The Second Tree from the Corner by E.B. White. So that was number one on the hit parade in 1954. And lastly, in this book here, The Choice is Always Ours, published in 1948. Found a couple of things. One just mildly interesting. It's a little guide, or not a guide. It's I'm at a loss for words right now. When you want to sign up for something, you can sign up to join this seminar, and it's a seminar at the Sequoia National Park in California, and the 1963 winter and spring catalog of different little seminars that you could join in the beautiful Sequoia Park, and but that was interesting. But I also found this letter from 1958, and it's from the Little Folk Studio. And Little Folk Studio, it says, "Please forward." They wrote this typewritten letter, the Little Folk Studio letterhead. Got their phone number up there, September 5th, 1958. It says, "The photograph you ordered has been ready for a long time. When your son was in, he said you had moved to Westview and that you would be in within a week. If you can't come in, send us a check for $5.20 and we will mail it to you. May we hear from you by September 10th. Thank you. Yours truly, Little Folk Studio." And I wonder if they ever sent it in. I wonder if they even got it. But that little photograph of the little boy might still be stuck in the studio. Might have to come out and twist your thumb to get your money. Anyway, that's all I have for today, and thanks for visiting, and we'll see you next week. And if you ever find anything that you would like to share on this particular segment, and I would share it, that you found in used books, send me an email at oldbook@ebookman.com. I changed the email address to be a little more direct to me. oldbook@ebookman.com. And send a little blurb about what you found and how you found it, and a little picture, and we'll share it here. Well, thank you, and that's all I have today, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Cooler than finding something in an old book is finding an old book. And that's what booksellers do. Last week, I read for you this letter that I had recently picked up from a soldier. It was written July 4th, 1863, the day after the 3-day Battle of Gettysburg. Well, this past week, I began to do some research. It turns out that this young man was part of the 3rd Vermont Brigade, which was the brigade at Gettysburg that defended against Pickett charge. The general of the brigade, who was mentioned in the letter, who was wounded in the leg at the battle, probably saved the entire war by taking the young Vermont soldiers and sweeping them around in 90 degrees to protect from Cemetery Ridge from the oncoming onslaught of Pickett's charge. So once I got a little bit deeper into this letter, it was just so much exciting. This week, I want to share with you an item that I found, something that I have not owned yet in my book career, and that's this, As We Remember Joe. There were only 250 copies printed at the memorial service for Joe Kennedy, and as you can see, it was edited by his brother, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who of course later went on to be president. There's at 250, there's not many of these around, but I noticed that there are two of them for sale online that were both signed by JFK. What a rarity. The only thing better than finding things in books is finding the book. A couple of comments that our listeners have sent in, and I just love this one from our regular listener, Sophia Shioban Wollahan Bogle. She just says, pop-ups are hard. Going back to Carrie's presentation and some of the books that she put on, it's just so encouraging when you're complimented by one of your peers. And thank you for noticing that, Sophia. What wonderful work Carrie's done. It's been very unfortunate. The last 2 weeks, we've had memorials to a couple of great authors, Larry McMurtry and Beverly Cleary. We've had another notable passing away this week, and that was of Prince Philip. Queen Elizabeth's husband died on Friday at Windsor Castle. He was 99 years old, and they were married in 1947. That means they were married longer than most of us have been alive. He served as the royal consort longer than any person in British history. And we put together, Alan's put together a little bit of a tribute to the Prince from the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. And now let's take a listen to that. And in the meanwhile, I'll just sit here and pet Tony. Bring it on, Alan.
It is with the greatest pleasure that the King and Queen announce the betrothal of their dearly beloved daughter, the Princess Elizabeth, to Lieutenant Philip Mountbatten, Royal Navy.
Into the dull November morning, two greys draw the Irish stagecoach.
I, Philip.
I, Philip.
Take thee, Elizabeth Alexandra Mary.
Take thee, Elizabeth Alexandra Mary.
To my wedded wife.
To my wedded wife.
Again and again the people called for Elizabeth and Philip. Again and again they joyfully responded.
Faith and truth I will bear unto you, to live and die against all manner of folk, so help me God.
And still Prince William, with his head hung, walking next to his grandfather.
He is someone who doesn't take easily to compliments, but he has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years.
I've just done what I think is my best. I can't suddenly change my whole way of doing things. I can't change my interests. I can't change my the way in which I react to things. It's part of that's somebody's style, and it's too bad. Lumpy.
Great sentiment. I can't change my style. It's just who I am. Unapologetically being yourself. Yeah, he might have been a little raw around the edges, a little bit rough in his words. He came from a different era, he came from a different class. But living your life, being true to yourself, being unapologetic about who you are, and just doing the best that you can is a great lesson for all of us. As is to be expected in the rare book world, whenever there's a passing of such a luminary or a great author, the search is on for materials associated with that person. It turns out that we recently saw some interesting items online for sale. We saw a 1966 Christmas card that was signed by both Elizabeth and Prince Philip. The dealer was asking $2,800 for it on Biblio. It's a photograph of them and their children. There was another item a little bit earlier, 1957, on ABE books for a little bit less, probably a little bit more available. We also found a coronation photo from 1952 signed by both the prince and the queen. You know, he was, the prince was actively involved in wildlife and conservation efforts as his son has taken over some of that role. There's an interesting project from 1957, the report and proceedings from the Dryly. It was a study conference of the human problems of industrial communities within the Commonwealth of the Empire. Undoubtedly, more items will appear for sale and availability as the next couple of weeks go on, and folks begin to pull these things out of the closet, thinking that they'll take advantage of the current sentiments. And we'll keep our eyes open for some of those and perhaps share them with you in the future. But right now, our condolences, the condolences of all Americans, go out to the Prince of the mother country, Great Britain, and to the royal family at this difficult time. All right, let's check in on some of our comments here we've gotten from our listeners today. We've got Warren Dufour from New Orleans, one of our weekly listeners. Warren, I'm working on a segment about Friends of the Library, which are very prevalent all across the country. When we could put things together, I hope you'll join us to be on that segment. If you've got any other ideas about who might be an interesting guest for that part, please let us know. We had on this morning a guest from Cheltenham, England. Where was he here? Ken Syme from Cheltenham, England. It's always great to have such internationality on our show. So please continue to listen, continue to watch, and share your questions with us. And right now, for most of the rest of the show, we're going to talk poetry. The Academy of American Poets started the National Poetry Month back in 1996, the month of April. So we've been here for 25 years, emphasizing the idea that poetry matters. The observance has grown every year, and so now millions of poetry lovers all across the land enjoy the event and participate, whether it's with readings, whether it's with writing your own poetry, or picking up a tome which you've been meaning to read but haven't for some time. For our part, we've decided to help mark the occasion by selecting some of our favorite poems, written by some of our favorite poets. And there are so many poets out there, we'd just barely be scratching the surface, not even scratching the surface such a monumental task to include everyone who deserves to be included in this segment of the show. And if you don't hear your favorite poet, put a note in the comments. We may not be able to get to your choice immediately on this show, but we'll bring them back in before the month of April and Poetry Month is over. So we've just chosen a few that we personally like a lot to get started with. We've had to leave out the ones we'd like to keep, and we can't be loyal to all of our poets. Our producer, Alan, told me that his mom was a librarian and a poetry lover. She memorized and recited poems around the house when he was a child. Could you imagine your mother standing at the stove, cooking the comfort food of the day, reciting the charge of the Light Brigade? I know, as for me, I learned my first poem, which we had to memorize, when I was in 7th grade. So if you'll indulge me for a moment, let's see if I can recall The Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. Here goes. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the burrow groves, and the mome raths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my soul, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the frumious Bandersnatch. He took the vorpal sword in hand, long time the maxim for he sought. So rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in oafish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, O beamish boy, O fragile day, Callooh, Callay, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toads did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the burrow groves, and the mome raths outgrabe. Well, that was my favorite as a child and still one of my favorites today. We're not breaking any new ground here. Our choices aren't edgy, well, maybe one or two. But for the most part, it's mainstream poetry. And today it's mainstream Americana poetry. What could be more American than the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere? We're coming up on an anniversary, April 18th. 1775, when that midnight ride occurred. So now, one of Longfellow's most famous. Alan, cue the midnight ride of Paul Revere.
Paul Revere's Ride, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere on the 18th of April in 75. Hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, "If the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. 1 if by land and 2 if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm for the country folk to be up and to arm." Then he said good night, and with muffled oar silently rowed to the Charlestown shore. Just as the moon rose over the bay, where swinging wide at her moorings lay the Somerset, the British man of war. A phantom ship, with each mast and spar across the moon like a prison bar, and a huge black hulk that was magnified by its own reflection in the tide. Meanwhile, his friend through alley and street wanders and watches with eager ears, till in the silence around him hears the muster of men at the barrack door, the sound of arms and the tramp of feet and the measured tread of the grenadiers marching down to their boats on the shore. Then he climbed the tower of the Old North Church. By the wooden stairs with stealthy tread to the belfry chamber overhead, and startled the pigeons from their perch on the somber rafters that round him made masses and moving shapes of shade. By the trembling ladder, steep and tall, to the highest window in the wall, where he paused to listen and look down a moment on the roofs of the town and the moonlight flowing over all. Beneath in the churchyard lay the dead in their night encampment in the hill, wrapped in silence so deep and still that he could hear, like a sentinel's tread, the watchful night wind as it went creeping along from tent to tent and seeming to whisper, "All is well." A moment only he feels the spell of the place and the hour and the secret dread of the lonely belfry and the dead, for suddenly all his thoughts are bent on a shadowy something far away, where the river widens to meet the bay, a line of black that bends and floats on the rising tide like a bridge of boats. Meanwhile, impatient to mount and ride, booted and spurred with a heavy stride, on the opposite shore walked Paul Revere. Now he patted his horse's side, now he gazed at the landscape far and near, then impetuous stamped the earth, and turned and tightened his saddle's girth. But mostly he watched with eager search the belfry tower of the Old North Church, as it rose above the graves on the hill, lonely and spectral and somber and still, and lo, as he looks, on the belfry's height a glimmer, and then a gleam of light. He springs to the saddle, at the bridle he turns, but lingers and gazes till full on his sight a second lamp in the belfry burns. A hurry of hoofs in a village street, a shape in the moonlight, a bulk in the dark, and beneath from the pebbles in passing a spark, struck out by a steed flying fearless and fleet, that was all. And yet through the gloom and the light, the fate of a nation was riding that night. The spark struck out by that steed in his flight, kindled in the land into flame with its heat. He has left the village and mounted the steep, and beneath him tranquil and broad and deep is the mystic, meeting the ocean tides. And under the alders that skirt its edge, now soft on the sand, now loud on the ledge, is heard the tramp of his steed as he rides. It was 12 by the village clock when he crossed the bridge into Medford town. He heard the crowing of the cock and the barking of the farmer's dog, and felt the damp of the river fog that rises after the sun goes down. It was 1 by the village clock when he galloped into Lexington. He saw the gilded weathercock swim in the moonlight as he passed, and the meeting-house windows, black and bare, gaze at him with a spectral glare, as if they already stood aghast at the bloody work they would look upon. It was 2 by the village clock when he came to the bridge in Concord town. He heard the bleating of the flock and the twitter of the birds among the trees, and felt the breath of the morning breeze blowing over the meadow brown. And one was safe and asleep in his bed, who at the bridge would be first to fall, who that day would be lying dead, pierced by a British musket ball. You know the rest in the books you have read, how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball from behind each fence and farmyard wall, chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to emerge again under the trees at the turn of the road, and only pausing to fire and load. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear. A voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo forevermore. For born on the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will waken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was mesmerized. And the graphics that go with that poem were just great. And then the hoof beats off into the distance at the end of the poem. That was so much fun. But you can't have too much Longfellow. Where there's one, there's got to be two. And I want to recite one more Longfellow poem. And the thing about this poem that I enjoy so much is the rhyming. And that's how we all learned about poems in our elementary school. We always thought that poems, it was necessary for them to rhyme. Iambic pentameter, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. And which one of us in the springtime of our youth didn't settle down with a pen and paper and try and write a poem for our nascent love, male or female, whoever it may be? And usually we started with words like love and dove and put them at the end of the sentence and figured out how to write the lines that ended in those rhyming words. Here's a great poem by Longfellow, The Day is Done. The day is done, and the darkness falls from the wings of night, as a feather is wafted downward from an eagle in his flight. I see the lights of the village gleam through the rain and the mist, and a feeling of sadness comes over me that my soul cannot resist. A feeling of sadness and longing that is not akin to pain and resembles sorrow only, as the mist resembles rain. Come, read to me some poem, some simple and heartfelt lay that shall soothe the restless feeling and banish the thoughts of day. Not from the old grand masters and not from the bards sublime, whose distant footsteps echo through the corridors of time. For, like strains of martial music, their mighty thoughts suggest life's endless toil and endeavor, and tonight I long for rest. Read from some humbler poet, whose songs gushed from his heart, as showers from the clouds of summer, or tears from the eyelids start, who through the long days of labor and nights devoid of ease, still heard in his soul the music of wonderful melodies. Such songs have power to quiet the restless pulse to care, and come like the benediction that follows after prayer. Then read upon the treasured volume the poem of thy choice, and lend to the rhyme of the poet the beauty of thy voice. And the night shall be filled with music, and the cares that infest the day shall fill their tents like the Arabs as the silently steal away. Maybe rather than settling down and reading the poet of your choice tonight, it's time for each of us to grab a pen and scribe our own iambic pentameter. And now, here's a poem that Alan grew up with, The Village Blacksmith. Alan, share it with us.
Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, The Village Blacksmith. Under a spreading chestnut tree, the village smithy stands. The smith, a mighty man is he, with large and sinewy hands, and the muscles of his brawny arms are strong as iron bands. His hair is crisp and black and long, his face is like the tan. His brow is wet with honest sweat. He earns whate'er he can, and looks the whole world in the face, for he owes not any man. Week in, week out, from morn till night, you can hear his bellows blow. You can hear him swing his heavy sledge with measured beat and slow, like a sexton ringing the village bell when the evening sun is low. And children coming home from school look in at the open door. They love to see the flaming forge, and hear the bellows roar, and catch the burning sparks that fly like chaff from a threshing floor. He goes on Sunday to the church, and sits among his boys. He hears the parson pray and preach. He hears his daughter's voice, singing in the village choir, and it makes his heart rejoice. It sounds to him like her mother's voice, singing in paradise. He needs must think of her once more, how in the grave she lies, and with his hard, rough hand he wipes a tear out of his eyes. Toiling, rejoicing, sorrowing, onward through life he goes. Each morning sees some task begin, each evening sees it close. Something attempted, something done, has earned a night's repose. Thanks to thee, my worthy friend, for the lesson thou hast taught. Thus at the flaming forge of life our fortunes must be wrought. Thus on its sounding anvil shaped each burning deed and thought.
Very good, very good. We have I want to call an audible at the line of scrimmage here. We've got a comment from Warren Dufer. Warren says, lately I've been reading the works of David Whyte, who lives in the Northwest. Well, real quickly, I'm going to pop over to poet David Whyte's internet website page, and I'm going to read the poem that resides on the front of his website. It's a short one, but it seems to be very emblematic of this pandemic time. Here it goes. David Whyte from The Bell and the Blackbird. I pray for you, world, to come and find me, to see me and recognize me, and beckon me out, to call me, even when I lose the ability to call on you, have searched for so long for me. I pray to understand the stranger inside me, who will emerge in the end to take your gift. I pray for the world to find me in its own wise way. David Whyte. I love this line. I pray for you, world, to come and find me. After this pandemic is over, I think we're going to be looking for a lot of people. All right, let's see who's up next. Well, we can't have American poets without having Edgar Allan Poe, and perhaps the most iconic of American poetry, deep and darkest poetry, the Raven. Quoth the Raven, nevermore.
Once, upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this and nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember. It was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before. So that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more. Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. Sir, said I, or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is, I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping, tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door, darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, Lenore. This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, Lenore. Merely this and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping somewhat louder than before. Surely, said I, surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see, then, what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, when, with many a flirt and flutter, and there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but, with the mien of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, perched and sat and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what the lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Much I marveled, this ungainly fowl, to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such name as nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, said I, what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of never, nevermore. But the raven still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking, nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing, to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er she shall press, nevermore. Then, methought, the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim, whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite, respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me, truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore, quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore. Tell this soul with sorrow laden if, within the distant Aden, it shall clasp a sainted maiden whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked, upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie that soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken, quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out of my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him, streaming, throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore.
Whew, wow, that was intense. Well, we could do this all day, and please don't send us any hate mail because we missed your favorite poet. Send us mail telling us who your favorite poet is, and we'll line them up. We're ready to go with Emily Dickinson, Ogden Nash, Walt Whitman, Carl Sandburg, Robert Frost, and even Shel Silverstein. But right now, for this week, we're going to conclude with one more great American poet. And if you're talking American poetry, we would be remiss if we didn't include Langston Hughes, who came to prominence in the Harlem Renaissance and was really, in my opinion, a precursor to the Beat generation, because what he wrote was jazz. It's jazz poetry. You bet it is. Here comes the All-American Langston Hughes.
Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain, seeking a home where he himself is free.
America was never America to me.
Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great strong land of love, where never kings connive nor tyrants scheme, that any man be crushed by one above. It was never America to me. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free. Say, who are you that mumbles in the dark? And who are you that draws your veil across the stars? I am the poor white, fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery's scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant clutching the hope I seek, and finding only the same old stupid plan of dog-eat-dog, of mighty crush the weak. I am the young man, full of strength and hope, tangled in that ancient endless chain of profit, power, gain, of grab the land, of grab the gold, of grab the ways of satisfying need, of work the man, of take the pay, of owning everything for one's own greed. I am the farmer, bondsman to the soil. I am the worker sold to the machine. I am the Negro servant to you all. I am the people, humble, hungry, mean. Hungry yet today despite the dream. Beaten yet today, oh pioneers, I am the man who never got ahead. The poorest worker bartered through the years. Yet I am the one who dreamt our basic dream. In the old world, while still a servant of kings, who dreamt a dream so strong, so brave, so true, that even yet its mighty daring sinks in every brick and stone, in every furrowed turn. That's made America the land it has become. Oh, I am the man who sailed those early seas in search of what I meant to be my home. For I'm the one who left dark Ireland's shore and Poland's plain and England's grassy lea, and torn from black Africa's strand I came to build a homeland the free. The free? Who set the free? Not me. Surely not me. The millions on relief today, the millions shot down when we strike, the millions who have nothing for our pay. For all the dreams we've dreamed, and all the songs we've sung, and all the hopes we've held, and all the flags we've hung. The millions who have nothing for our pay, except the dream that's almost dead today. Oh, let America be America again. The land that never has been yet, and yet must be. The land where every man is free. The land that's mine. The poor man's, Indians, Negroes, me, who made America, whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plough in the rain must bring back our mighty dream again. Sure, call me any ugly name you choose. The steel of freedom does not stain. from those who live like leeches on people's lives. We must take back our land again, America. Oh yes, I say it plain. America was never America to me. And yet I swear this oath, America will be. Out of the rack and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot of graft and stealth and lies, we the people must redeem the land, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains and the endless plain. All the stretch of these great green states, and make America again.
Wow. Let America be America again. That's the thing about poetry. It's timeless. This poem could have been written yesterday and it would still apply to the country, to America. Well, folks, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining the Rare Book Cafe. If you missed the show, you can pick us up on podcast, listen to us in your car, or lay on the couch. Pull us up on YouTube or Facebook and watch the show. Thanks to our listeners that logged in live. Thanks to all of you that are going to listen to us throughout the week. And we'll be back next week with more guests from the Rare Book Cafe, where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free. Keep smiling, everybody.